Welcome into the Quest Number 9 podcast. My name is Seth Warner. Today we're going to talk about Kentucky basketball from a fan's perspective. Here to help us talk about Kentucky basketball, Zack Geoghegan.
Thanks for having me on again. It's my second time joining the quest for number 9, so I'm glad to be on. And it's kind of been a busy week around just the whole UK athletics. Well, not even, it's barely UK athletics anymore. The Champions Blue, all that. So it's been a very busy week. But yeah, we got some fun stuff to talk about, so I'm ready to get going.
The Champions Blue, it's LLC.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's the new body that's basically going to turn into UK athletics. So it'll be very interesting to see how that all kind of plays out.
That's another interesting transition that Kentucky's made. So with the House settlement, what are your biggest takeaways from like the House settlement and all of that kind of chaos at the moment?
Well, just kind of going off, I'd probably have the same view as a lot of people, especially if you're a Kentucky fan, how does it relate to the basketball team in terms of revenue distribution? You get the 20.5 million per year to spend on your NIL, and I think it's like 75% for football, and then kind of trickles down from there, like 15% to basketball, then 5% for other sports and things like that. So especially with Kentucky in particular, where even at a school like Kentucky, obviously football is still kind of like that's your big money sport. You need that sport to be really good, and the better it is, the more money you can make off of that. So you still need to pump enough money into that program to make it worth it, but you also have a basketball program that fans really want to be kind of the upper echelon and obviously competing for titles every year. So it'll be very interesting to see how, because I know Mitch Barnhart actually talked yesterday when they were doing some board of trustees meetings. He talked to Maggie Davis of BB and tonight, basically saying that we haven't really decided how they're going to use that 20.5 million, like how it's going to be distributed. Is it going to be a year by year thing? Like kind of how are they going, how much money exactly is going to go into the basketball team? So there's still a lot of questions that I feel like need to be answered right now regarding all of that. But I'm sure all of these things will be figured out over the coming weeks and months. So it'll be very interesting to see exactly how much money Kentucky does kind of shift over to the basketball program, and then how they can work the other actual NIL deals where they're going through a clearinghouse and they're approving deals that can add money on top of that 20.5 million. But those are supposed to be actual, like, transactional, like you do a job, you get paid for the job type thing, as opposed to just getting a lump sum of money associated with, some company or something like that. So it'll be very interesting to see how it all plays out. But it's going to happen in the coming months. We're going to learn all this stuff. At least how that first year goes will be very, very interesting.
And with you were saying Kentucky being a little bit different position compared to some other schools with basketball being more of a priority, what are your thoughts on maybe having a 65% football cut where you were saying other schools might be 75?
Yeah, I don't know. That's probably the question that Mitch Barnhart is probably trying to answer right now. That's probably the question that's keeping him up at night, is how do they go about actually redistributing things? I don't know. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be, obviously schools can kind of pick and choose which ones they want to spend it on. I guess maybe luckily, I guess you can phrase it this way, that Kentucky's in the SEC where all these other schools are going to want to spend a bunch of money on their football teams too. So it's not like Oklahoma's going to randomly spend 50% of their money on their basketball team and just have this superpower. Like that's probably not going to happen. So even if Kentucky, goes up from the 15% to a 20 or 25%, maybe that does happen. But like I was talking about with the other NIL deals, like that's kind of where you can see Kentucky maybe finding ways to add more money on top of that 15% cut or whatever it ends up being that the basketball team ends up getting. So that's the question that is definitely keeping Mitch Barnhart up at night, is how he goes about redistributing all of that money and making sure it's fair enough. And what we know about Barnhart is he really likes he wants to keep the non-revenue sports afloat. He wants to make them still prominent and have a voice on campus and stuff like that. So, I'm sure he wants to make sure that all the secondary sports are kept happy, that football has enough to be a competitive team in the SEC, and the basketball team can compete for national titles. So how he ends up doing that, I don't know, but that will be one of those questions that we'll have answered here over the next however many weeks and months.
Yeah, and one of my other big questions when it comes to this, how do you think collectives are going to be in play when it going forward in the NIL space?
See, that, I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure how the collectives will really all factor into the revenue sharing and how they factor into the NIL clearinghouse and all that. I haven't really dug into all that yet, so I'm not entirely sure how that will all play out. But I do know that they'll have some sort of role in there. How big their voice is could be pretty important. So that's something we'll just have to wait and see, I guess, as more rules and guidelines and actual legislation kind of comes around and makes things more clear for us.
And with this not really impacting this 2025, 2026 roster as much, more 2026, 2027, because comes in effect July 1st, right?
Yeah, so I believe that all the deals that Kentucky's already signed with their current roster, they got those deals in before the approval. So I guess those won't count towards that 20.5 million. I suppose next year is when that $20.5 million threshold actually comes into effect, and that's when Kentucky will have to start operating under that. So I would imagine Kentucky is spending a lot more than the 15% cut of the 20.5 million that they're going to get next year on this year's roster.
How do you think Kentucky will place themselves going forward with that kind of situation?
Well, they've already kept on Walker Horn, so they brought him back. He went into the transfer portal as a walk-on and then ultimately elected to come back. He was spotted. He was doing the workouts that they had yesterday when UK was posting their summer workout pictures. So they kept him in under that grandfathered system. I don't know how they'll go about it moving forward. I believe that once the grandfather rule kind of exhausts itself, you're kind of just stuck at that 15 roster or the 15 roster pieces, I believe, and that will include, whatever type of walk-on additions they want to do. I believe that right now, like they can go over the 15 roster threshold by and have walk-ons because of that grandfather rule, but I don't think that'll be the case moving forward. At least with the basketball team, walk-ons will probably be more or less a thing of the past beyond this year. I know it's more important for football because a lot of the walk-ons are like practice guys. You need those bodies to just get yourself through practices. I haven't looked into how the walk-on situation will impact the football team all that much. I know they've upped the roster limits on that as well. So at least for this year, they're going to have Walker Horn on there. I guess they could still maybe try and bring back Zach Toe or Tao. I forget how you say his name. If they want to do that, maybe they can grandfather him back onto the walk-on roster if they want to. But yeah, so at least Walker Horn is back. We know that.
Yeah, and really starting to focus in on this upcoming season, a big thing that we've talked about has been in social media and this past week is the rule changes. What are your thoughts on some of the individual rule changes that Kentucky's made?
Yeah. Well, I like them both. I think the two main ones are the coaches' challenges, which have more or less been a success in the NBA. It has kind of, I mean, there's still a lot of like late game reviews and stuff like that, but it has kind of cut out the nonsensical ones that would just kind of drag on and you're getting reviews every like couple seconds. That was kind of an issue for a while. And the coaches' challenges have cleaned that up a little bit because now you don't just review every single little thing. So it's been, I would say, probably a success in that aspect. So I'm perfectly fine with the coaches challenge rule coming to college because, as we know, referees are far from perfect, especially at the college level. So it'll be nice to have a couple of challenges in your back pocket, especially they're doing the same rule as the NBA. So you can, as long as you have a timeout, you can use your challenge. If it's successful, you keep your timeout and you get another challenge back. But if you lose it, you lose your challenge and that timeout. So there will be some tactics to how they use it. And luckily for someone like Pope, he has 4 or 5 years of NBA. The NBA's been using it for that long, so he can look into what the best time to use it is. Should they try and save all of them for late in the games? How important is it to use, like, let's say your best player, like Jalen Lowe, gets his second foul 4 minutes into a game, and you think it's kind of questionable? That would be awesome to have a coach's challenge because you can go in and actually, I don't think they can review foul calls in college. They can in the NBA. I'm not sure if they've actually added that into the college level. They didn't announce that in the press release, the NCAA. So I think it's more out of bounds calls, goaltending, things like that. Goaltending was an issue, though. It felt like over the last couple of years with college basketball, just not being able to get those calls right or like doing them after the fact. Like I know Kentucky had a couple instances where they just lost multiple buckets throughout the season because of like uncalled goaltending type things. So yeah, I'm for that rule. We'll see how it kind of works in practice. I'll be interested to see if they kind of sneak in some language about allowing it to be able to review fouls like you are in the NBA, because I think that's really like the main sticking point of having that's like the biggest factor of having the coaches challenges, especially in the NBA right now. Certainly in the playoffs, like when guys are getting quick and early fouls, like that's really when the coaches love to use them. But then the other one is the continuation rule, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm just like, I keep talking about the NBA. I'm an NBA fan. I love the continuation rule. As we were talking before we hopped on here, there already was kind of a continuation rule in college basketball last year. It felt like it was more erratic, like Jeremiah Fears in particular for Oklahoma. Kentucky fans remember having a couple of and one finishes there that probably were questionable, in terms of continuation. So, but now it'll be a little less questionable because The wording is different than the NBA. Like in the NBA, the moment you go for your gather, and if you get fouled, you can take your 2 steps or your 2.5 steps wherever you get fouled, and you go up for a shot that will still count as a shooting foul. But the NCAA has worded it to where I'll list it off right here, or I'll write it off. It says an offensive player who ends his dribble going towards the basket and absorbs contact from the defense will be permitted to pivot or complete the step the player is on and finish the field goal attempt. I think that's the most important part of that wording is, or permitted to pivot or complete the step the player is on. So how I read that is when they're like right before they're about to go up for a foul, like if they are doing their 1-2 gather and they get fouled on that second step, they can still go up and complete that play for an and one. But like if they get fouled immediately on their gather, it doesn't sound like that will be counted as an and one or continuation like it is in the NBA. So it will be, I think, a little bit. There will be more of like a strict guideline to how they call that, which is fine. It does happen in the NBA and it's fine. I have no problem with it, but I can understand why people in college will be like, if a guy gets fouled beyond the 3-point line, takes 2 giant steps into the paint, and then throws up like a floater and gets fouled like that, do you really want that to be a continuation foul? I can understand why college basketball fans wouldn't want that. But overall, I think the continuation rule needs to happen. I'm glad it happened, and it's just going to make the sport more exciting because you're going to get more and one finishes. That's really the reality of it, and that's what we're here for. Is we want more highlights, more fun. So bringing that as well. Those are the 2 big changes, though, that they made at least. And they talked about changing from halves to quarters. That'll happen eventually. They didn't say it is approved this time, but it just sounds like it's coming. There's no reason to not have quarters at this point. Every major basketball platform in the world does quarters. So, and it should help theoretically do less free throws because the bonus resets after each quarter. So you're not like getting into a double bonus situation all that early or shooting as many foul shots. And it should ideally cut down like a couple TV timeouts per game as well. So it should ideally speed up the flow of the game whenever that does come. And I'm excited for that one.
And you were talking about the quarters when they're reviewing it, and they have like their one of their committees is gonna actually like dissect it this year. But they should have been doing it a while ago.
Yeah, they've been doing it for a long time. I've been covering the Kentucky women's team for 5 years now, 6 years, and there's no point not to have it. You even get 2 more opportunities for buzzer beaters, like late clock situations and stuff like that. So I just think overall it just makes the game more exciting, and there's no reason not to have quarters at this point. So it definitely sounds like it's coming.
Yeah, and let's really start talking about the roster for this 2025-2026 season. Who do you think is probably your most like interested fit to see in this Mark Pope system and how they played last year and how they'll translate to this coming year?
I've talked about it before. I think Mo Diabate is my guy that I'm really looking forward to just because he's unlike anything that Kentucky really had last year in terms of just a guy that's massive and can guard 3, probably 4 positions, maybe even 5. Like you could probably, there's situations where he can guard all 5 positions depending on who's out there, but just a huge dude, great like elite level rebounder, very smart defender, like has been to an Elite Eight and a Final Four his first 2 years, so he's got plenty of experience. Shot the ball decently well on low volume at Alabama last year. You're gonna get him like his points are gonna come as a cutter and in transition and like cleanup stuff like that, which I think will be perfectly fine as long as Kentucky's surrounding him with guys that are all skilled and can go out there and can score in a variety of ways, which I think will be the case. So Mo should fit in pretty well there. I think he didn't really do any of the zoom action stuff or anything like that at Alabama, like what he'll do at Kentucky. So we'll see more of him trying, not necessarily running the show, but being more involved in pick and rolls and things like that and helping set up the offense, working more with like the top of the key. So I expect him to start. He'll probably be your starting 4 alongside Brand Garrison from the jump until Jaden Quaintance gets healthy. But I really like adding a guy like Mo Diabate. I mean, he's played 60 college games, 70 college games. Like I said, these back-to-back Elite Eights at minimum. He's played in a similar offense that wants to run fast and shoot a lot. So I don't think there will be that much of a transition period for him. I'm very excited to see what he brings and kind of how he takes that next leap in his game. And if he can add a reliable 3-ball, like if he can be a guy that doubles his shot output from 3 and still kind of has similar percentages, like he's going to be a very, very dangerous type player. So I'm looking forward to watching him play a lot.
If he could double his volume and keep over 40%, he would be that'd be a player.
Yeah, that would be, he'd be making at least a 3 a game at that point. Yeah. So if he's hitting a 3 a game at 40%, that's a very dangerous
because he's
player. Yeah, something
on
like that.
like
So
46%. It's still really
yeah,
good. But and one of the things that surprised me about him is his shot blocking. Only being
yeah,
6'7", but a guy that can go up and get it. And also, what little you were talking about, not a whole lot of zoom actions, but I saw a couple clips, just a couple plays of him having the ball at the top of the key
hmm
when it would like get distressed, when teams were really pressing up on those Alabama guards. That in
yeah.
that Alabama offense, they play their offense through a lot. He showed some good things there, is kind of trying to find something that would convert over to Kentucky.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he can put the ball on the floor. He definitely can, but it's not like that's not his strong suit by any means. But in a pinch, like he can do that kind of stuff. Absolutely.
and who do you think on this team has the highest upside? Probably outside of JQ. I'll
Okay.
give you
Highest
that.
amount of upside. I mean, Colin Chandler is probably a good pick just because of how well he was playing at the end of the season, and it felt like things were really starting to come together for him. We kind of forget that he was like a top 30, top 40 high school kid before he went on his mission trip. And like we really saw him kind of piece things together, and the game just started to slow down a little bit for him as the season went along, especially in those last like 3 or 4 weeks. Like he was essentially like Kentucky's sixth man throughout the entire postseason. So how big his jump is, I think will be that'll be a big determining factor, and I guess what Kentucky's ceiling is. But then a guy like Jalen Lowe is another one. I think Jalen Lowe has a very high ceiling. The shooting numbers weren't good at Pitt last year, but you can make up a ton of different reasons as to why just looking at the team that was around him. So if Jalen Lowe takes because I expect him to cut down his shot diet pretty much in half and become just more of like a pure playmaking guy, which I do think he can be. I mean, that should just make him a little bit more threatening as an offensive guy, knowing that he doesn't have to go out there and score every single time. He can dish it off to guy like Ortega or Aberdeen or whoever's coming out there. So I do think you could see a lot of Jalen Lowe. I'm a big fan of what Jalen Lowe is going to bring. You could say like Jasper Johnson, if he can really hit his kind of like or live up to his 4-star, high 4-star ranking. You've got a pretty good player there. Cam Williams is someone I'm still not really sure what role he's going to play or how good he's going to be, but if he can come in and kind of produce the same that he did at Tulane last year as a freshman, if he can do that again this year, then you're looking at a bunch of good things. But Brandon Ramsey and I have talked about this a bunch. It's like you really only need a couple of all of these guys that we've talked about here to, two out of these 5 or 6 guys to really take a leap for Kentucky really start to make some noise, and anything after that is just gravy. So, but I imagine a couple of these guys will really take those leaps that a lot of people are expecting and are hoping for.
And with Kentucky having technically 3 freshmen in this class, how are you seeing them translate, even with one international player? How do you see them translating to the college game and to the American game?
Well, with Jasper, I think it's just going to be, can he stay on the floor with his defense? Does he give up too much on that end that whatever he brings on offense doesn't make it worth it? There's a world where his offense is just so good that it doesn't necessarily matter as much what his defense is like. It'll still obviously matter, but if he can shoot 40% from three and do it on a high volume and get to the rim at will, you can kind of justify maybe him having some struggles transitioning to being a good defender in college, which is just tough for a freshman. But he's long enough to at least you see the tools there. With Moreno and Brayton Hawthorne, I just don't really see much of like a role for them this year. I think they both know that coming in. Depending on like what happens with Jane Acquaintance's recovery, maybe you could see Moreno or even Reese Potter step in and get like more minutes than maybe they were expecting. I expect those guys to actually still play, like because Pope loves to just feed guys minutes as much as he can. But I don't think they'll have really prominent roles unless JQ his recovery just goes haywire. And then for Yelovich, that's the one that'll be the most interesting, just because like he's technically a freshman, but he's 21 years old. He's been playing professional basketball in a top 10 league for 2 years now, like producing as well. Like he was the second leading rebounder in the Adriatic League last season, can shoot the ball, like really skilled guy. So how he actually translates to the physicality of the SEC in college basketball will be very telling. But I think there's a big role for him coming this season off as one of the first, 1 or 2 guys off the bench, because he's just so skilled and like he's exactly what you're looking for in a Mark Pope type guy that shoot threes, pass the ball, wants to run up and down, long guy. He can block shots too. His transition, like how quickly he can adapt to the college game, is another one of those things that if this happens, then Kentucky can take a lead type thing. I do expect him to be not a starter because I have that spot filled in for Mo, but I do think that Yelovich will be probably the first guy to come in for Mo and play 15 minutes a game or something like that.
And with this front court having so many guys, but JQ being slow to come back, if for my thoughts is ish 10, 15 minutes ish a game to start
Mhm.
off. How else do you see the pieces falling into place, especially early in the season, how tough their schedule is?
Hmm. Well, and that's kind of the fun thing about having a tough schedule is you can really toy, especially early on, is you can toy with a lot of lineups and different things, and you want to win all these games, obviously, but it's not going to absolutely just like wreck your resume if you lose some of them. So, in terms of how I see everything kind of falling into place, like I don't know, are you asking for like the starting five or like how I kind of think the rotation's going to
How
fill
the
out, or?
more the rotation?
I think he'll probably go with like a 10-man rotation, at least to start in a lot of these games. I think you'll probably go veteran heavy in the starting lineup. I can see Jalen Lowe, Aberdeen, Oweh, and then Diabate, and then probably Garrison is like your starting five. And then you bring in Colin and Jasper and Yelovich, Cam Williams, and who else am I forgetting here that I'm looking at? Yeah, Moran or Trent Noah, even bringing those guys and probably go like a 9 or 10 or maybe even 11-man rotation against those really good teams. But that's where Pope he'll be able to learn pretty quickly like what fits and what works and what doesn't. I'm sure he'll still toy with things as the season goes along and try and get bench guys extended minutes, but you're going to learn pretty quickly when you're playing Louisville and Indiana and even the exhibitions. You get Purdue and Georgetown coming right away, so you're going to learn pretty fast like kind of what's going to work in the immediate. And then when you play all these tough games, you're going to learn, okay, like we need to adjust however much or little they need to. And it should make things by the time they get to SEC play, they should have a pretty like solid idea of how they want the rotation to factor out. So I think that's one of the nice things about having all these tough games. And it can be like a game by game situation of how Pope wants to, actually roll out his rotations.
And with Kentucky's schedule starting to fall into place, what's your probably top three favorite games you're looking forward to?
Ooh, top three favorite games. I might have to pull up the schedule at this point to even look at
Yeah.
them. The Louisville game is going to be a lot of fun because it's early in the
Yeah.
season. Michigan State will be fun because I just haven't played them too late. Oh, St. John's, obviously, that's the game I'm looking forward to the most. I still forget that that game's on the schedule because it just seems so surreal that St. John's is now in the
Yeah.
CBS Sports Classic. So that game's going to be awesome. What is it? It's December 20th, so right before Christmas, too, in Atlanta. Like, that place is going to be popping. That's going to be such a fun atmosphere. I'm sure Jack Pilgrim will go down for KSR, so he'll get to cover it in person and we can all live vicariously through his eyes. But that's just going to be such a fun game. The lead up to that one is going to be just,
Mhm.
it's going to be Pope and Patino kind of like exchanging like not jabs, but like funny little remarks and stuff like that. It's going to be all friendly and fun until the game actually starts, and then they'll want to rip each other's heads off. So I'm very much looking forward to that game. I mean, even this Purdue exhibition game, I'm really excited about just to see a potential top two, three, whatever team they end up being in the country in the preseason. That'll be a lot of fun. It doesn't count, so we get to judge the team based on a result that doesn't matter, which is nice as well. If things go poorly by chance, or if they go terrifically, then we can start dreaming of what can be down the road. So there's a lot of fun games on the schedule, and you get two shots at Florida this year as well. So that'll be a lot of fun. They've reloaded. They're going to be a top five team in the country too.
Yeah. And then UNC's, I'm pretty sure that's the newest update on the schedule. First time coming to Rupp since 2012.
Yeah.
So that's big news with Kentucky losing the battle for Caleb Wilson. What are your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on kind of like that matchup with UNC not having their best year and being a very big year for this coaching staff?
Yeah, it's very the UNC situation definitely feels because they've got like a very expensive roster from all reports, but maybe not the most talented team. And you obviously have the Caleb Wilson angle where he's actually going to get to play in Rupp, where Kentucky fans thought that was going to happen for a long time, and he ended up spurning the Cats for UNC. So that'll be really fun. He'll probably hear some boo birds whenever he gets announced in the arena. But yeah, that'll be a big game just for Hubert Davis in North Carolina as a program because they do kind of have a weird roster. Like just on paper, it doesn't seem like it's one that's going to be like a real threat to maybe contend. But who knows? Like by that point, like that game's not too late in the season. I'm seeing it's December 2nd, so you're like halfway through your non-conference schedule by the time it comes up. So Kentucky will have had some, they'll have had some like teaser games up before then, like some easy ones to get themselves prepared. But that'll be a fun game. Like you said, there was a lot of those Kentucky UNC games. Like when I was growing up, those were a lot of fun to watch. because they would happen every year at that point.
Mhm.
So those were good matchups, and it's just always fun when two blue bloods are going at it, especially at a home setting, like not a neutral court or anything. That'll be a really fun game. It will be a big game for Hubert Davis, especially if they're already kind of struggling coming into that one. There'll probably be some pressure on him to steal a win there.
And as the season kind of picks up in the off season and players just go on campus, who are you most looking forward to see getting reports back on when we get practice film and people going to watch?
Hmm. Probably Cam Williams, just for what I was talking about
Mhm.
earlier. I'm still not entirely sure what his role is going to be, like how much or how little he's going to play, because he wasn't a guy that really had the ball in his hands a lot at Tulane. He was still really good, like all conference over there, almost scored like 10 points a game. Is like he was a pretty young freshman. I think he was 17 for a lot of that year. So like I could see him being kind of the Colin Chandler or the Otega Owe of last off season, where it was like, oh, these two guys are like maybe they're better than we think type thing. Then it turned out to be right, at least Otega initially, and then Colin eventually. But there's just a lot of depth, more depth on this team. If Cam can come out and prove that he's a guy that deserves to play 10, 15, 20 minutes a game, that's going to be a very, very good sign for Kentucky because that kid's really good at shooting the ball and playing defense. So if you can have him come in and play 20 minutes a game reliably, that's just another thing that really will help Kentucky's ceiling. So I would love to hear some good stuff out of him or from him coming out of these summer camp or workouts and all that stuff. Because if he can kind of turn into this NBA prospect that I think a lot of people think he can be, then you've got something special there.
Yeah, another guy that we haven't talked about is Denzel Aberdeen. How did you see him fitting in?
Beautifully, as Mark Pope would say, but beautifully. I think he's going to be a kind of a natural fit there next to Jalen Lowe. Aberdeen's a guy who can play on ball, but he spent most of his time playing off ball for a team that won the national championship and had some really talented guards around him. So he knows how to operate in a system like that, especially Florida's again kind of similar to Kentucky, and they want to shoot a lot on offense, score a lot of points. So there's familiarity there. But his defense is going to be something that is really going to juice up that backcourt. It's going to take a little bit of pressure off someone like Jalen Lowe or Jasper Johnson, whoever's kind of in there running the show at the time. But with Denzel, he's at least just going to help you at the point of attack on defense like that. You pair him with Otega. That's a pretty strong perimeter defensive front right there. So you've got a winner. You've got a guy who's played 3 years at Florida in the SEC. He's played, I think, probably close to 100 college basketball games at this point, if not more. So he's got the experience. He's got the size. He's got the defense, the physicality, the athleticism. Like I don't know if you saw all the pictures going around today of the summer workouts where Denzel looks like he's got like a 45-inch vertical or something like that. And these summer workouts, like his hands all the way back here as he's going for a dunk. So there will be some added athleticism to that backcourt that was maybe missing a little bit last year. Denzel's going to be a huge piece. Like I kind of expect him to start and probably play around 20, 25 minutes a game.
And the guy that we were gonna maybe talk about when you're talking about highest upside, Jaden Quaintance, how do you see his development happening even though he has that torn ACL?
Yeah, I guess it just depends on the return timeline. Like he keeps talking about wanting to be ready for the regular season opener. I've just from watching a lot of basketball and seeing how long it takes guys to come back from ACL injuries, I just find that a little bit far fetched. So I'd rather than maybe play it a little bit slower and ease him in. And then by the time the SEC play comes around is when he can really start going all out. And you can really try and toy with him and work him into the rotation, see what fits. And then by the time February, March rolls around, you've got him back up to speed and he's kind of playing at the level that the top 5 potential NBA draft pick level that everyone wants. So, but hey, if he comes back in October and he's 100% healthy and he wants to play, then roll him out there and let's go. If he's as advertised, they've got a legitimate defensive player of the year candidate down low. If he comes back in the middle of the season, he probably won't be able to be playing enough games to get those type of awards. But he's that caliber of player for sure.
Mhm. All right, that's all from the Quest Number 9 podcast.
You can find me as always at KentuckySportsRadio.com. I have a podcast. Well, it's more of a video breakdown show on our YouTube channel with my friend Brandon Ramsey. It's called Zoom Action. We do just look at film, and Brandon Ramsey puts on his coaching hat, and I ask him questions, and he answers them, and it's a lot of fun. We do a lot of that stuff on our YouTube page. And then you can also find me on Twitter at Zgeoghegan KSR. Geoghegan is Geoghegan.
All right, if you want to stay updated to all Kentucky basketball, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.